everyone, I hope you're all well. Today I thought I'd have a look at this, which is the Winsor and Newton's Complete 96 Watercolour Palette Dot Chart. That's one side, and then it's got all the other colours on the other side. Let's just pop that up so you can have a quick look at the key. I don't have many Winsor and Newton paints. I've got a few. I've got this little set which actually I ended up changing some of the colours and adding a few extras because there were two that were quite similar in this set, and there was a white and I didn't really care for that, so this is a kind of a custom built palette and it keeps sticking. So some of the colours came with this set, but quite a few of the other ones I added myself. For example, I added the Quinacridone Magenta. I swapped out the regular Alizarin Crimson for permanent Alizarin Crimson because that one should be more light fast. I added the Cobalt Turquoise Light, the Indigo, and I think I added the Van Dyke Brown as well. Because with the raw sienna there was also a yellow ochre and they were really similar, and there was also a white and an ivory black, and I just didn't really like the whole palette. I prefer to have a few brighter colours in there as well, so now I think it's a pretty good palette. And I haven't used it very much yet. I've taken it out a few times, but I tend to forget it's in my bag, if I'm perfectly honest, and it's nothing to do with the paints. I really like the paints, but I thought it might be fun to swatch out every single colour in their range and see what they're like. I do also have a tube of their Potter's Pink, which I really like. It's one of the nicest Potter's Pinks that I've seen. Alright, I've just pulled it out of the plastic and I thought it was 2 sheets, but actually it's a whole booklet. That's pretty cool. So that would be the front of the booklet. They've just folded it the other way around, I guess, so you can see all the colours. I'll put that there so you can pause it and have a quick read if you like, because I'm so not reading all of that right now. I'll be here for all day. And painted colour palette. Just add water. Well, I can do that. I've always got plenty of water around. Okay, so I will get back with my paintbrush and I will start swatching. So basically the idea, if you haven't seen these sorts of videos before, is that they've blobbed a little bit of their paints onto here and they're dry, and then basically you get some water and your brush and you re-wet them and paint the square, and it gives you an idea of what the colours are going to look like once they're wet. You can also swatch them onto other paper, but I think I'll just do it on here today. It took me ages to pick a brush. I think I'm going to use this one. I don't even know what this is. Just a random brush in my collection. It's synthetic fibre. I've got my water pot here. It has 2 chambers, so I can make one side grubby and have the other side for rinsing, so I can keep the water clean. It's much easier when you have 2. Alright, let's test a few and see how it goes. After this first one I zoomed right in so you can see it much closer. This is Lemon Yellow Nickel Titanate PY53. The chart doesn't have pigment numbers, so I actually went onto Winsor and Newton's website and found them and wrote them down so that I can read them out as we go along. This is definitely nickel titanate rather than a traditional lemon yellow, because this one is far more opaque. Going on, we have Bismuth Yellow, which is quite similar, a little bit brighter I found, and that's PY184. And the next one we come to is one of my absolute favourites. This is Cadmium Yellow. This one is very opaque and incredibly easy to re-wet. I loved this colour. The next one is Windsor Lemon, which would be your traditional lemon yellow. That one is PY175. The Cadmium Yellow is P35. And going on to the next one is Windsor Yellow, and this one is PY154, and this would be your standard yellow colour. This is what is in my palette and probably the most common one in sets. The next one is Lemon Yellow Deep, PY159, and this one was a lot paler, semi-opaque, not my favourite. The next one is Aurelian, Y40, and this one is going to turn brown probably in the sunlight once it's dried, and so probably not the best colour to have. I'd rather go this transparent yellow. So beautiful. PY150. I really love this colour. Amazingly transparent, and definitely a better choice than Aureolin. I never know how to say that word. Moving along, we have Cadmium Yellow Pale. This is PY35 and also very opaque. Next to it we have Turner's Yellow, which seemed to me a little bit more of a chalkier colour, PY216. New Gamboge is made of a couple of pigments, PY150 and PR209, and this is a lovely warm yellow and nice and transparent, although it says it's semi-transparent rather than fully. Cadmium Yellow, which ironically is two pigments here, PY35 and PO20. That one's okay. Windsor Yellow Deep is PY65, and we're starting to get a lot more into the orange spectrum here. Indian Yellow is PO62 and PY139, and that's a lovely warm colour. I hope I'm not going too quickly. It feels like this is really fast, but I didn't want it to take hours and hours. Cadmium Yellow Deep, PY35 and PR108 or 108. Quite similar to Cadmium Yellow, just a little bit deeper. And Cadmium Orange is PY35 and PR108 as well. It's interesting that that's quite a bit more orange than the other one, even though the Cadmium Yellow Deep and the Cadmium Orange have exactly the same pigments. Very odd. Windsor Orange, now this is your really true orange, P062. In my palette I have transparent or translucent orange, I forget which one it is, and this one's not on the chart unfortunately, but I like the Windsor Orange as well. Windsor Orange Red shade is also lovely. That's a far stronger red colour, although it's PO73, so it's still an orange pigment. And Cadmium Scarlet is PR108, and this is our first official red pigment. Very vermilion colour, very lovely. Scarlet Lake is PR188. This one's a little bit more transparent than the Cadmium Scarlet, but they're both really nice. And the next one's Cadmium Red. I found this one quite difficult to re-wet. It's meant to be quite opaque, but as you can see, I did not get much pigment out of it. I don't know why, if it was just my particular dot, maybe that one just doesn't like to be re-wet. Cadmium Red Deep was much better, and if I had to choose between the two, this is also PR108, the same as the Cadmium Red, I would definitely pick the Cadmium Red Deep for its re-wettability. Windsor Red, I have this one I think in my palette. This one is PR254 and is a nice semi-transparent red. It's a very useful colour. It's pretty much bang on red, you know, it's not too orange, it's not too blue. Rose Doré, another one that re-wet quite difficultly, and so I actually let it sit while I tried to do another layer on that Cadmium Red, but yeah, I just didn't have much luck. The Rose Doré is a rather strange combination of PY19 and PV97. I wasn't really a fan of it, although it is really transparent, so it may come in useful if you love to have super transparent, subtle colours. The next one is good old Quinacridone Red, PR209. Now, this one is a much cooler red and is also a nice transparent one. And going on to the next one, we've got Windsor Red Deep, and this is a lovely semi-opaque colour, PR264. I definitely have this one in my palette. Now we have Permanent Alizarin Crimson, PR206. I bought this one to replace the original one. The Alizarin Crimson, which is next to it, which is the traditional PR83 and is a pigment that is notorious for being very fugitive and will disappear in the light. As you can see, the permanent alizarin looks almost identical to the regular alizarin, so why not get the permanent, and hopefully that one lasts a bit longer. I have not done tests to see if it actually is a lot more light fast, but I certainly hope so. we have Permanent Carmine here, and this was one that did not have a pigment number and I couldn't find it, so your guess is as good as mine as to what Permanent Carmine is. It's pretty, I'll give them that. The next one here is Permanent Rose, and this is PV19, which is actually a violet quinacridone, I think, but it's very, very pinky in this one, and I do like it. Our next colour is Rose Madder Genuine, which is an NR9, and this one I think is also a really, really fugitive colour, so it's probably not a good idea to get it if you want to sell your paintings. And speaking of fugitives, we have Opera Rose. It's such a beautiful version of the colour. It is PR122 and it will be fugitive, unfortunately, but it's still really pretty. A safer colour to use would be Quinacridone Magenta, and it's one that I have in my palette and I really, really love this colour. It's also really, really vibrant. It's PR122 and it's really, really pretty. I love it. Going on to Permanent Magenta, which is PV19. This is a lot more violet and is not one of my favourite colours. I always prefer the pinker magentas. And Cobalt Violet, as we know with my experiences with Core, is one of those colours that does not like to lift, so I've wet that one and I've moved on to Permanent Mauve, PV16, which is quite a nice colour. It's very, very granulating, this one, and also quite natural. And after a little while, the Cobalt Violet did lift quite well. It's such a beautiful colour, I really love it. PV14, but it is a nuisance to re-wet, I must say. Ultramarine Violet, PV15, is a nice purple. It's not as deep as Dioxazine Purple will be, but I find it's a really nice mid-purple, and I've used it quite a bit, but not actually from Winsor and Newton itself. I think I have the Daniel Smith version. This one is Windsor Violet, which is the Dioxazine Purple, and this is PV23. These colours are always really bright and vibrant, and you can't go wrong with them. Indanthrene Blue is PV60. I've always got a special love for this deep colour. I really love the Daniel Smith Indanthrene Blue, but the Winsor and Newton one seems to be quite pretty as well. And going on to the next one is Cobalt Blue Deep, PB74. This one's quite granulating and is quite a solid blue, probably right bang in the middle, you know, of the blue spectrum. And then we have French Ultramarine, which is PB29, which is your standard ultramarine pigment. I like this one. I think French Ultramarine is a really decent colour to have on your palette. It's, you know, a fairly common one, but it is robust and it doesn't fade, and it's a good one to have. Now this one is Ultramarine Green shade, which I think is quite interesting because it's also PB29, and I don't really get why you would have that one instead of the French Ultramarine, because it's just nowhere near as strong. Go for the French over the Ultramarine Green shade. Then we have Cobalt Blue, which is PB28. This one's semi-transparent, but I found it once it's dry it's a little bit chalky, so I'm not a huge fan of that. Next up is Windsor Blue Red shade, which is PB15 and which is therefore Phthalo Blue in more common terms. Often companies will name paints. It does not necessarily mean that's what they actually are. It's always good to check out the pigment number, which is far more accurate and will tell you what the colour is made of. This one is Antwerp Blue, which is PB27, and I would consider that to be Prussian Blue, whereas the Prussian Blue, which is also PB27 here, this thing would not re-wet, it would not budge. I tried and tried to get colour off it, and I had no luck whatsoever. I don't know if it's because there wasn't that much paint on the dot to begin with, or if the Prussian Blue just doesn't work, so I don't know on that one. I would go Antwerp Blue. And here we have what I would consider as the true Phthalo Blue, which is Windsor Blue Green shade here, and this is also PB15. They haven't put colons in here, which is quite interesting, but this is the one that I would consider to be your usual Phthalo Blue and is one of my favourites. Going on to Cerulean Blue Red shade, which is PB35, and then I'm switching to Cerulean Blue, which is also PB35. Of the two pigments here, I liked the red shade better. It dries a lot nicer, I thought, than the Cerulean Blue, although the Cerulean Blue felt a little bit more transparent somehow. But of the three that look similar, I actually really love Manganese Blue hue. I've always seemed to pick this one over Cerulean, and I would love to one day get one that is genuine Manganese Blue. There's only a few companies I think that do that. Manganese Blue hue is PB15 again, which is Phthalo Blue. There we go. Next one is a gorgeous Phthalo Turquoise Fp B16, and this is also one of my absolute favourite colours. It's so pretty and so transparent. And then we have Cobalt Turquoise Light, which is PG50 and is a really lovely colour. I use this one in my set. This one here is Cobalt Turquoise, which interestingly is made of two pigments, PB28 and PB36, and it's slightly greener. And then we have Cobalt Green, which is PG50. Once again, that Cobalt Turquoise Light is PG50 as well, so it's an interesting colour difference in those two. And then we come into Windsor Green Blue shade, which is PG7, and also I think is Phthalo Green Blue shade for most other colours. It's a very bluey green, not one of my favourites. PG18 is this one, which is Viridian, and I'm pretty sure that is genuine Viridian. Like most Viridians, it is an absolute pain in the butt to re-wet, and so I avoid this colour at all costs, really. It's just such an annoying colour, and everyone goes on about it because it's, you know, the traditional one to use, but no, there's other colours out there which just work so much better than Viridian. Like, for example, this one, which admittedly is a lot yellower, but this is Windsor Green Yellow shade, or Phthalo Green Yellow shade, and this is your standard PG36. This is such a good colour, you can't go wrong with it, really. It's a good one to have on your palette, and I would pick it over Viridian any day. Now this one they've labelled as Terra Verte, but is actually Perylene Green, which is neighbouring, so they've gotten the labels around the wrong way. So Perylene Green is made of PBK31, and it's also another colour that I just adore. It's perfect for shadows. Okay, now we have Terra Verte, which is always an absolute nightmare to re-wet. This one is made of PG23, PG18 and PB28. I think I would just skip this colour altogether. It's three pigments. You can see me putting an arrow there so I remind myself, but I could tell straight away which one was Perylene Green. But yeah, the Terra Verte is three pigments, and I probably just wouldn't get it because of that reason, and also because it doesn't re-wet. Oxide of Chromium, PG17, that re-wet quite nicely and is quite a nice muted green. And then we go on to Hooker's Green here, which is PY110 and PG36. And I've always been a fan of Hooker's Green. I think it's a lovely leaf green. Going on to Sap Green, which is just slightly yellower. This one's PG36 and PY110. I have this one in my palette, but I think if I ran out, I would probably switch to the Hooker's Green. I really like it. The olive green here, PY65, PB115:6, and PR101. That's got a lot of pigments in it. And then this one, Terra Verte Yellow shade, is PG23, and I would have thought that this was actually the original Terra Verte. But yeah, another one to struggle at re-wetting. It might be better coming straight out of tube, but yeah, when it's dry, forget trying to re-wet it. Now this one is so vibrant. I do love a green gold. PY129. You can't say much about that other than it's really transparent and very bright. Naples Yellow, possibly hue, is PW6 and PBR24. And Naples Yellow Deep is just PBR24 on its own. These are great skin colours, or bases for skin colours, I should say. Going on to Light Yellow Ochre, which is PY43. I've never been a huge fan of ochre. I think if I was going to choose one, I would just go for the yellow ochre, which is also PY43. Both of them are semi-opaque, but it's just never one of my favourite colours. For some reason, I just can never warm to a yellow ochre. Although you see that this one, after a little while, did re-wet quite nicely. I tend to prefer going for raw siennas, and this one is a PY42 and a PR101. I have this one in my set, as well as the yellow ochre, and I took the yellow ochre out just to use the sienna. Sienna is a lot more transparent, and I really love it for that reason. I think, though, I would go for the gold ochre. I think this one's a really, really lovely colour. This one's PY42. It's semi-transparent and has a lovely deep rich gold colour. I like it a lot. And speaking of gold, the next one is Quinacridone Gold, which is a mix of PR206, PV19 and PY150. Obviously Quinacridone Gold is not a pigment that exists anymore, so every company has its own mix. Brown Ochre, PBR7. This is a very natural colour. It's like a duller version of Quinacridone Gold, and I guess it would be okay, although I'm not a huge fan, to be honest. Magnesium Brown is PY119, and I found that this one had a little bit more in the way of granulation, and is quite a nice colour. Burnt Sienna, PR101. Yeah, not much I could say about it, it's quite orangey. Also, I should mention, sometimes I say 0 and sometimes I say O, and I do apologise for that. I just realised I'm doing that. I do this in everyday language too. Light Red, PR102, or 102 if you will. Yeah, not much I could say about that one. It's kind of like sienna. Venetian Red I like, PR101. It's a lot more opaque and redder than sienna, but I tend to reach for it a lot more, I find. Indian Red is next, and it's very, very similar, also PR101. It's just a little bit browner, I would say, than the Venetian Red. And coming up next is Brown Madder, which is PR206. This is a lovely transparent, or mostly transparent, browny red, and I would probably find quite a lot of use for that. And this is Potter's Pink. Yes, it's hard to re-wet, but it is a gorgeously granulating colour, and I've noticed that their pink seems to be a little bit pinker than some of the other brands out there, so I would highly recommend Potter's Pink by Winsor and Newton. Perylene Maroon, PR179. Both the Perylene Maroon and the Perylene Violet next to it are incredibly transparent, and they're both really lovely colours, although I usually tend to lean towards the Perylene Violet. I find the violet is such a nice mix between red and brown. It's a really great colour to use. Caput Mortuum Violet. This is PR101, and it is a nice granulating brown. Okay, going on to Raw Umber. This one's much lighter than I would expect from a raw umber. Normally it's a much deeper brown, and I found that this one didn't re-wet that well either. This is PBR7. And speaking of PBR7 mixed with PR101 and PY42, we have Burnt Umber. Normally I'm a big fan of Burnt Umber, but this one had too many pigments in it and I can't get behind it, I'm afraid. Though I do like the Van Dyke Brown, and I chose this one to put in my palette because it's a much browner brown, if you will. It's made of PR101 and PBK6, and I just preferred that one over the Burnt Umber. Sepia is PBK6 and PR101, which is the same as the Van Dyke, but is so much darker, and I think a lot blacker. Indigo, such a great colour. PBK6, PV19 and PB15. Now I know it has a mix of 3 pigments, but I can never resist an indigo, so I did get that one for my set. And it's a particularly lovely one, it's a really deep blue. Payne's Grey, PB15, PBK6 and PV19. I do like Payne's Grey as well. I don't currently have it in Winsor and Newton, but I usually carry it in most sets that I have. Neutral Tint is PB15, PBK6 and PV19, and is just a little bit towards the browner side of things. Ivory Black is PBK9 and is quite opaque. Then you get into your lamp black, which I consider true black really, is PBK6/7, and that's a nice solid all-round black if you want to have one. And then you have your Mars Black, which is PBK11 and is far more granulating. So if you want to have a granulating like a lunar black, go for this one. It's really pretty. Once it dries, hopefully we'll see it on there. And then Davies Grey has the most pigments, PG17, PBK6, PBK19 and PW5. That's a lot of pigments, and you'd probably use this as just a convenience mix. I don't know that I would have it. It seems a little bit green for some reason, but not a great colour for my particular palette. Now we have Chinese White, which is PW4, and Titanium White, also known as Opaque White, which is PW6. Okay, these are all mostly dry now. Here is the whole chart that's all painted out. They look pretty together. I think I wouldn't mind hanging this on the wall just as a decorative piece. It's nice. A few things stand out for me. I really like the cadmium yellows. That lemon in particular is lovely. I think if I was to get a replacement yellow for the Windsor Yellow, which is the one I have now, I would definitely lean towards that. The transparent yellow is nice. Cad Yellow Pale is good, as is the Cadmium Yellow. All of those ones are really great. The Cadmium Orange wasn't too bad, but I found that the Cadmium Red just wasn't as great as some of the other ones. The Cadmium Scarlet's lovely too. The two Alizarin Crimsons, they look pretty much identical. This one is maybe just a little bit richer, but not enough that I think this one wouldn't work just as well. And this is the one I have. I also have this one as a backup, but I would prefer to have one knowing that it's probably going to be a bit more light fast than the original Alizarin Crimson. Same with Rose Madder Genuine. I imagine that will be pretty fugitive, as is the Opera Rose, because it's got the fluorescent pigment in it. That will disappear and then it will become a lot duller in the sunlight. The two Cobalt Violet and Permanent Mauve are really, really granulated. The Cobalt Blue Deep has got granulation. I didn't see it so much in the Cobalt Blue itself, although there is a little bit. The Cerulean Blue Red shade's granulated, as is the Cerulean Blue. These are definitely switched around. That is Perylene Green and that is Terra Verte. And both Terra Vertes here and here were a pain to re-wet, I can tell you that. Potter's Pink I love. It is such an amazing granulating colour. Oops, there we go, let's bring it over. Look at that. That is awesome. The Mars Black is, I would say, Lunar Black in a few other ranges. It's very, very granulating as well, so that's a really good one if you like a granulating black. Otherwise, I'd probably go the Lamp Black or either the Payne's Grey or Neutral Tint, although you can see that the Payne's Grey is quite a lot bluer than that neutral. So you could also either pick between Indigo and Payne's Grey. You probably don't need both. One would be enough. I think overall the colours are really lovely in the Winsor and Newton range. I mean, they haven't got as wide of a range as some other companies do, but I think they have some really great pigments and some really lovely colours, and they are a very, very old company, very reliable, so you can't go wrong with some Winsor and Newtons, but maybe they would be a little bit cheaper in your country than they are in Australia, because man, they're expensive. So I only have a few of them which I got off Jackson's because the palette was so much cheaper than buying it here. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this swatch video and gotten some useful information out of it, just to see if you're in the market for some new paints. It's always nice to see what they actually look like when they paint out, especially if they re-wet. That is really important, because if they don't re-wet, it's incredibly frustrating. So thank you again. I hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll swatch you later. Bye.